So good afternoon, everybody. In common with many other of the speakers this morning, or some of the speakers at least, I, as an accountant among a bunch of creatives, wonder why I'm actually here. You can see I'm an accountant because I'm one of the few guys wearing a tie here. I'm chairman of an organization in Luxembourg called LuxFlag, and I'll explain what LuxFlag does in a few moments. But first of all, I'd like to talk. LuxFlag is involved in the microfinance industry, and perhaps I can give a few introductory points. First of all, on the microfinance industry, because what I have been hearing this morning is extremely positive, in the sense that when I wondered whether I was really on the margins of this discussion, I'm finding that with 1.3 million businesses throughout Europe, it will be interesting, in fact, to explore how microfinance might have a place in the creative industries. And I'll be followed by Philippe Delvaux from the European Commission, who will be talking about what the Commission is doing on the front of microfinance. Initially, the objective of microfinance is to help alleviate poverty throughout the world by providing financial services to those to whom access has previously been denied. It's not a panacea. It's not supposed to provide the solution to world poverty, but it is one possible solution to part of the issue. Microfinance came to prominence a couple of years ago when Mohammed Yunus, Professor Yunus, Bangladeshi, who founded Grameen Bank, received the Nobel Peace Prize. So there's been a bit of publicity about microfinance since then, but there's also been some negative press about microfinance. For example, concerns that microfinance might be pushing poor people into even more poverty by requiring by burdening them with additional loans. Just to clarify, what's the difference between microfinance and microcredit? Microfinance includes all types of financial services. You can imagine, in addition to just loans, people also need funds transfers. For example, people who work outside their own country want to send small sums of money back to their own country to support a family. They might need micro-insurance, and in addition to just loans. So the term microfinance refers to all of these services, but microcredits, of course, is only loans. The microcredits are supplied by specialized banks or small institutions. And what is of interest actually in this discussion is that they expect to have a double bottom line, not just a financial bottom line. They don't just look for a financial reward, but they also look for a social reward, obviously, as well. So people talk in microfinance about the double bottom line. They want to see poverty being alleviated, and they don't necessarily put financial reward as the highest priority. So microcredits are supplied through microfinance institutions, which vary from one country to another. In some cases they're very small, in other cases they can be extremely large. What brought home the size, to me, what brought home the importance of the size of the microcredit industry is I had a presentation from an Indian who said there are something like 80 million potential users of microfinance in India. If you consider the average size of a loan that you make in microfinance in India, it's about $500, and 80 million times $500 is $40 billion. So when you add up all these small amounts of money, it's a very, very big industry. So, as I mentioned, one of the ways of defining microfinance is through the size of the loan. Generally, people worldwide talk about microfinance not exceeding 5,000 US dollars. In Europe, it might be 5,000 euros. In Eastern Europe, for example, they even use 10,000 euros as being a kind of ceiling. So I can imagine that one might talk in the UK of microfinance of being anything up to, microcredits being anything up to, say, £10,000. It's not terribly tightly defined. What is defined is that it's a loan. It's not a freebie. It's not a donation. The loan is interest payable, interest bearing, and it's repayable. Generally, it's a short-term loan, and for 1 to 2 years, and it has a business purpose. It's not consumer lending. It's not to allow people to buy televisions or washing machines or whatever. It's to allow people to run a business, and for example, that is one of the major differences between general people's perception about poverty alleviation and microfinance. What does it mean? It's not a consumer loan. It means that the loan is repaid from business cash flow. So up front, people have to examine the business case and make sure that the loan can be repaid from business cash flow, which does imply that, at least in the broadest terms, you know that there's a business there. The woman who buys a sewing machine in Bangladesh for $100 knows that she's going to make garments, and in 2 years' time she'll be able to generate the cash. The loan's not secured. It's not secured over the sewing machine. It's secured over the business plan. However broadly you might look at a business plan, and it's secured also on social values. If that woman is living in a village in Bangladesh and everybody around her knows that she's got a loan that she has to repay, there's huge social pressure for her to repay that. Now, it varies from one country to another as to what that social pressure does, but for example, the same might not be true of a Russian. The same values are not providing pressure on, for example, a Russian. But in each country there is the microfinance institution has to adapt in order to ensure that there is reasonable security for the loans. And there's a huge, in general terms, in microfinance, we talk about somewhere in the upper 90s, 95, 97% of recoverability of the loans, which is fantastic compared to, let's say, not to choose anywhere at random, but the US, for example, under present circumstances, certainly would be nowhere close to that level of repayment. The loan may be granted to acquire fixed assets, that I just talked about, or it may be in order just to generate working capital for the business. And in fact, it is more frequently for the generation of working capital than it is for the acquisition of fixed assets. I have a nice slide here that I can't show you, but it generally shows how the structure of the business works. If you can imagine on the bottom layer we have the individuals to whom the microcredits are granted. The next level up is microfinance institutions, those small banks that I talked about. They have to find their funding somewhere. That's the $80 billion that they need for India, for example. They have to find their funding both from savings. They might find it from micro savings. They might find it from domestic capital markets, but they might also find it from the international capital markets. And when they're looking for funding from the international capital markets, that means people like you and I are going to be investing in investment funds probably, or pension funds or whatever, in order to provide the financing from those funds to the microfinance institutions. Now, that's where LuxFlag comes in. LuxFlag grants a label of recognition to microfinance investment funds. You maybe know Luxembourg is quite a center for investment funds. LuxFlag grants a label, a kind of wool mark to investment funds, which says to the investor, the potential investor, this fund really does invest in microfinance. I'll come back to that in a moment if I'm allowed to have the time. But the question is then, I guess, for this audience is, does microfinance have a place in the creative industries? So why not, I would say. Provided they're small, they seem to fit into the definition, except for poverty alleviation. But I guess that some creative artists are pretty hard up and would consider themselves to be on the poverty line anyway. So why not? If the loans are small, if they're short term, if they're business orientated, they're used to finance working capital and fixed assets. And also in economic terms, it's supporting the growth of an economy and supporting a sector which would otherwise not receive this service. So I'd like you to hear your views later on whether you think £5,000, £10,000 has a place in the financial support of the creative industry.